I was convinced that everyone was stupid and that logic had been abandoned 5 years prior. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here on the channel, Bella's Bookshelf. I am your host, Bella, and today we are continuing the So I Read series, where I read popular books and tell you what I thought of them. Just like in my previous video, I'm going to preface this by saying everyone has opinions. I'm sure we're not going to agree on everything when it comes to every single book. That's just impossible. So that being said, if my opinion is different from yours, go ahead, fill the comments section with your pleas and begging to try and get me to see your point of view, but I'm probably not. I'm pretty sure that by the time I do this video, my opinion, my decision is final, and there's probably going to be no changing my mind, so that's that. With that out of the way, it's time to get into what book we are going to be talking about today. And it is none other than Defy the Night by Brigid Kemmerer. Kemmerer? I don't know. I hope I said that right. I don't know. Anyway, we are going into Defy the Night. I'm pretty sure that anyone in the book community knows this book. Just like what I said with Red Queen, it's pretty popular. Not the most, but it is pretty popular. For those of you who maybe don't, off the top of your head, what is Defy the Night about? In the wilds of Kandala, apothecary apprentice Tessa Cade has watched people suffer from a mysterious sickness for too long, all while the only cure, the moonflower elixir, is saved for the wealthy. So every night she defies the royal edicts and sneaks out, stealing moonflower petals and leaving the elixir for those in need. In the palace of Kandala, Prince Korik serves as the king's justice, meting out vicious punishments to agitators and outlaws. Korik must strike fear into the heart of his kingdom. With a shortage of elixir and threats of rebellion looming, the king's grip on power is tenuous at best. But Korik knows his brother is the kingdom's best hope for survival. When an act of unspeakable cruelty brings Tessa and Korik face to face, the outlaw and the royal are confronted with an impossible choice. And a surprising spark. Will they follow their instincts to destroy each other, or will they save the kingdom together and let that spark ignite? It's a really popular book. It's a widely liked book, which is why I'm a little bit nervous about this. Actually, going into this, I did not know that it was going to have such a Robin Hood feel to it. I mean, obviously I'd read the back. I read the back of the book and I knew what it was generally about, but for some reason I just hadn't had the idea, it's gonna have super strong Robin Hood feels. But it really does, which maybe if I really knew that going into it, things would have been slightly different, but I didn't know that. This book has a good mix well, surprisingly. Also really satisfying, like. So I actually read Defy the Night almost right after Red Queen. So I was looking forward to trying this, but after how Red Queen went, I was leery. I was a bit like, okay, let's aim our expectations lower and be ready for anything. Okay, so let's finally just get into this review of the book, Defy the Night. Starting with my impressions on chapter 1, which I might have to skim chapter 1. I'm not actually sure if I remember what happens in chapter 1. Okay. Alright, got it. So, right off the bat, I did like Tessa a little bit more than Mare from Red Queen. I did notice that her internal monologue was actually written on the page, unlike Red Queen, where we didn't really see any of Mare's thoughts, and that's why I felt kind of just detached from her and couldn't really understand a lot of what she was doing or why she would do certain things. But Tessa had a bit more of that in the book, which made things a little bit better. But despite that, Tessa still lacked true internal conflicts in her character. I find this more and more with every book I read, at least in the popular genre. If you're going to write internal conflict in a character, it must be established within the first chapter or the first couple of chapters. If you don't, it's not going to feel prevalent to the plot. I've read some cases or seen some cases where the author attempted to insert internal conflict like midway through the book, and it felt really weird and just disjointed. So Tessa did not really have true internal conflict throughout any of the book, sadly. Which instantly makes her a bit unrealistic. But, well. So as I said before, I was somewhat excited for Defy the Night. Leery, yes, but excited because, you know, naturally. Like I said, I liked Tessa a little bit more than Mare. I was having some hopes here. The feel of it, at least from the first chapter and maybe second chapter, was interesting. But unfortunately, I don't know why, because I read reviews saying the exact opposite of this. I had such a hard time getting into this book, like falling into the plot, visualizing everything. Like, you just know that feeling when you're reading a book and you just instantly get sucked in and you're with the characters. You understand what's going on. You are like at the edge of your seat. You're hooked. I did not get this with Defy the Night. I tried so hard, but for some reason I was just not clicking with it. I feel like the book kind of dragged on in the beginning. It felt like it took so long to get to the catalyst of the main plot. I want to say that it hits around like 100 pages or so. And I'll be honest, I came so close to DNFing it already just because I was getting bored. Now, don't get me wrong. In some other books, there are instances where the main plot doesn't really surface or start or get anywhere or make a leap until 100 pages or so. But in between page 0 and page 100, you have your main character who will most likely be colorful and lively enough to fill in that gap. Or the world building and world itself is interesting and is building itself to that point. It's enough to just keep you reading and keep you wondering what was going to happen. There will most likely also be little hints here and there of what's going to happen that will keep you turning pages. But I did not get any of that from Defy the Night. I didn't. At this point, I honestly found Tessa kind of dull and boring. Still liked her better than Mare, but I still just was not finding her that interesting of a character to read. She kind of reminded me of any typical fantasy female main character where they are just afraid of the most random things, but at the same time they are not afraid to talk back to authority. Authority that could kill them with a snap of their fingers. And I gotta say this, I did not understand Tessa's stupidity in infiltrating the palace. When the thing happens and she thinks that Wes was executed or hanged, I did not understand why she decided all of a sudden, with no real plan, to try and infiltrate the palace and get close enough to the king to poison him. I was like, what? Like, when she had the idea, I'm like, no. I'm like, you are not gonna get far enough to do that. No. Yes, her emotions were driving her. I understand that. When our emotions drive us, we do crazy things. But she is supposed to be smart. At least to Korik. Korik said she was brilliant. Which, if I'm thinking about that, what does that make Korik? Because I'm going to be getting into some stuff that he does where I'm like, how dumb are you? A smart person, even when bombarded with emotional stress, is still going to be strategic. Yes, their plans might be a bit rushed, but they're going to have the emotion driving them. They will have an actual plan, if they're actually smart. A smart person would devise a better plan than Tessa's. And as the book continued on, I started to feel like a lot of things in the plot were not making sense. Especially as we got a bit more, I guess, information and backstory onto the kingdom and how things were for the royal family and the disease, whatever it's called. I don't know if it had a name. Itself. The big thing that I was not understanding was, if I have this correct, the plague first started 4 years prior to the present. That's not that long ago. Like, if you think about it, that's not that much time. It's stated beforehand that the royal family was loved by the people, and in turn, the royal family loved their subjects. They had a good, healthy relationship in between the royalty and the commoners. They were loved. They treated them right. And then, for some reason, when the plague hits and the king and queen die, Harriston is made king and makes 15-year-old Cork his judge, which I'm like, already right there, yes, Cork may be your most trusted ally in this instance, but why would you, I don't know. So all that aside, why did the people turn on them so quickly? Because if the royal family was truly loved by the people, they would have a track record. Even if this thing happened 4 years ago, like I said, 4 years is not that much time. You had how many years, decades beforehand to know them? Why is it that you just suddenly turn on these people who have cared for you just like that? It seemed like the people were just angry because there was not enough elixir to go around. And honestly, if I'll get into this in a little bit, but if that is the problem, then what can you really do? You, at least in the bounds of your country, not everyone is going to be able to survive if there really is no way to get more elixir. It's just the truth. I hope I fully understood this, but again, at the same time, I was having a hard time getting into this book. So Tessa's father, he was one of the apothecaries or alchemists or whatever, right? And he tried to go before the king to explain their problem. As I said before, the royal family was loved by the people. The royal family loved the people. So, if you were to go before the king, he would listen to you. The princes were loved by the people. They would listen to them. But it's said that apparently he just stopped trying to see the king because there were too many people also trying to see the king. If your nation is in crisis, you're going to try everything you can to stop this problem. If I remember correctly, her parents, Tessa's parents, died 2 years prior to the book. So how much time exactly were you trying to see the king? If your nation is in crisis and people are dying, wouldn't you want to try everything in your power to stop this, to let the king know what was going on? Violence is the last resort. In a case where people are already dying, why do you want to instantly resort to violence and thievery? Yes, you could say they were stealing from the rich who had plenty to give to the poor. It's still stealing. It's the truth. If you were truly worried about this situation, wouldn't you try with all your might to finally get before the king and explain the problem? I don't know if this is exactly what the book said, but Tessa's father was a trusted apothecary, wasn't he? He had a reputation. He wouldn't go unheard. Why? And then the whole West being Cork thing. I don't know people's reactions to that plot twist, but for me, when it hit, I wasn't like, oh, whoa. I was what? I did not understand it at all. Usually when it comes to twists like that, especially if there are both point of views, you sort of see hints of that character in their point of view. Obviously not a lot, but at least enough hints so that when the twist does happen and you look back on the point of views, you're like, oh, it was there all along, but I just didn't see it. I didn't get that at all with Cork being West. It confused me. And, getting to my next point, it made me kind of dislike him even more. Because my thought process is, Cork, for 2 years, you've known what's been going on with your people. The more people are dying, and you have not told Harriston. You and Harriston are close. He would listen to you. Why didn't you tell him? And later in the book, Cork tries to explain that I think Harriston wouldn't believe him because, oh, Cork doesn't have any medicinal background. He doesn't know anything about this. But he's seen it firsthand. Him and Harriston used to sneak out when they were younger. Harriston would listen and trust him. book was making me feel like everyone was just running from their problems and not facing it. Like, especially the whole thing with the rebellion. I'm like, you people do not have to start this rebellion. This problem is a problem of your choosing because you didn't try hard enough a couple years prior. If you had gathered a group of people to go see the king, you would have listened. You wouldn't even be in this whole situation. What? And then at the same time, I feel a little bit like Harrison wasn't even trying hard enough to find other solutions for the Moonflower. It's like, yes, he didn't know about there being a lack of it, but still, it would be good to, you know, manage your reserves, make sure that you had enough. More than enough, maybe, just in case, if you really cared about your people. I don't know. I didn't understand a lot of the characters in this. Don't even get me into the whole thing about Tessa thinking that... what's his name? Alexander? Is that his name? Alexander. Don't even get me started on the whole thing about Tessa thinking
it wasn't fair
that Alexander was in charge of the most moonflowers because he had the biggest land. It's like, girl, it's life. Life is not fair. Deal with it. And kind of like Red Queen, not as much as Red Queen, but still, I feel like there's so many happenstance situations in this book where things just so happened to happen and just so happened to be in their convenience. Tessa made a few more decisions, actual plot-changing decisions than Mare, but still, I felt like at some point in the book, a lot of it then got out of her hands, and she wasn't really directing the plot anymore. The big thing in books is that you do not want your main characters to be effects of the plot. You want them to be causes of the plot. You want them to be driving the plot and changing it. You don't want them to just be reacting to it, because then at that point they're just a victim of it and not an actual driving force of it. And so most of this book was just dragging on for me. I did not see anything incredibly likable about Korik. I did not see anything incredibly likable about Tessa. I'm like, Korik, what do you see in Tessa? What makes her attractive and likable to you? I'm like, she doesn't seem to have any defining characteristic of her that makes her unique or really that special, in my opinion. And that's where I get to my confession. I skimmed through the last half of the book. I didn't actually read every single page of the last half of the book. I just could not. I could not bring myself to. I was convinced that everyone was stupid and that logic had been abandoned 5 years prior. Again, like Red Queen, maybe things get better in the second and third books. I actually did read reviews for the second book, and people were actually complaining about character development for Tessa, which, in my opinion, I'm like, no, bring on the character development. It's what gives the book depth. But then it's like, if you're writing it in the second book, why not the first book? There are ways to write character arcs, to draw them out over the course of several books. There are ways to write the arc so that way, at the beginning of the first book and at the end of the first book, they've made some progress through their arc. There are ways to do it. I feel like maybe authors don't, because depending on if they're a debut author, they don't want to risk starting character development and then their book not maybe be successful enough to continue it, and they don't want the character development to feel kind of like, I don't know, incomplete. But like I just said, there are ways to write character arcs and development so that way over the course of like one book you could do it and it would feel complete. There are different stages to character development that if you end at one stage, it could still be seen as a fairly good character growth. But then again, it's like if they don't want to write character development because they're afraid their book won't be successful, why do they write the cliffhangers then? Especially if they're debut authors, why do they write the cliffhangers if they don't know if their book is going to be successful? I don't know. And so that's my review of Defy the Night. I was extremely disappointed with this. Maybe just so much as Red Queen. With Red Queen, it was more I had so much high expectations. With this, I was just disappointed in the writing and some of the logic of, no, not some, all of the logic of the characters. I did not understand why they were doing what they were doing. Some of the literal plot and history did not make sense to me. I'm like, you could have solved this problem if you had just tried harder. I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say here.